All right, now, everybody. Quiet, listen to me. We're going to start a show. Now, some of you people have been with me before. You know it's going to be a tough grind, but we're going to have a show.
And hello all, what a show today. I must tell you, every day we try to bring you something of a balance. And some days it's more balanced than others. But it's great to have you here because today I think is the perfect balance. And speaking of the perfect balance, let me welcome in...
Why are you yelling?
The lovely Kim.
Kim, how are you?
Yeah. Kim, fresh off the Nikki Maduro show I watched a bit today. I was going to comment on something, and now I've forgotten what I was going to comment on. So much for that. Tony's back, everybody. Tony. Yeah. Tony is the man. He works so many jobs, you know, KFI Radio. He does stuff for Stephanie Miller. He does stuff, I don't even, the Angels, the Los Angeles Angels. It's crazy. Anaheim. I appreciate you working as Anaheim Angels, whatever. Yeah. Anyway. Thanks, Tony.
Thanks, Tony.
Yeah. And as I was saying, we have the perfect balance today. I will share with you what's going on with both politics, world tensions, and game shows. It all is in the show today. So here's how it's laid out. You know, it's funny. And then I'll tell you something that happened last night late, and it's really serious, but when you hear it, you'll go, well, that's not that serious. But some of you will get why it's serious.
It was serious to you.
It was serious to me. So today's show reminds me a little bit of big sports matchups where they say, you know, this may be, for example, in football, they'll say, this may be the matchup that's equivalent to the Super Bowl. So I'll give you an example from the 49ers season. 49ers and Cowboys. The 49ers and Cowboys game was supposed to be, that was going to be the Super Bowl. Cowboys, if you just look at it, you know, man for man, they match up really well against the Niners. The Niners really stout in so many different ways. I mean, this is going to be a great game, these two, right? Then they played the game, and the Niners blew them out. I mean, it was over by the middle of the third quarter. I mean, really over. I mean, I think they pulled, you know, quarterbacks and stuff. It was just one of those things. It was a slaughter, right? So today, I'll give you, it's our Cowboys-Niners, but I think this could really be a great game that we're about to play. But we do have to play the game, so we'll see. But here's what's on the show today. We're going to get into a lot of things that are going on in politics, in the world, and we have got a great Law and Disorder, which involves the mother of that 6-year-old who shot the teacher and her being sentenced. We've got a chunk of Trump. I've got a major move on the part of the huge Latin network Univision and how they're now shifting right, kind of like a Fox News channel of the Latino set. That's all there in Chunk of Trump and in our first half hour. And probably the only strategy to really beat back the serious threat that Donald Trump and the GOP actually represent to the upcoming election. So we'll get into that as well. The really probably, I'll share with you at least the thoughts when it comes to laying down a strategy and maybe the only strategy to really beat back that threat. That'll all happen in the first half hour. Then we have a palate cleanser for those who just don't want to be steeped in politics or bummed out or, oh my God, Mark, well, you know, can we get away from Trump? Or I feel you. And the king of game shows will be here. Bob Boden is amazing. Bob Boden has truly been involved in so many game shows, and his life is populated by all of this game show knowledge. He's a network executive, you understand. He's a He's developed game shows. He's run game shows. When it comes to game shows, he's the guy. So I bumped into him and I said, gosh, I think my audience might really enjoy hearing about some of this stuff. You've been with so many legendary shows, $25,000 Pyramid and Family Feud and all of these,
Match Game, Scrabble Showdown.
Yeah, thank you. Right.
Love it.
So
that's my game.
Yeah, so I think it could be great to have him here, and of course, he'll be playing for a new car. Yeah, that's right. He'll be playing for a new car. So, the segment with Bob will be followed by the great David Katz. So, Katz will be here, and we'll talk about legal entanglements that affect the Trump family and Trump business. But beyond the Trumps, there are a couple of things happening, one of which is the feds have come down on the mayor of New York.
Yeah.
They seized his phone and a bunch of communications devices, like, computers, this sort of thing, laptop. He could be in serious trouble. The mayor of New York. And David Katz will also weigh in on that briefly.
I was talking to David Katz last night, and he said, I just got off a plane from New York. He had flown to New York to do their top morning show TV show in New York, talking about this mayoral issue with the mayor being, having his office raided or whatnot. And he's like, I just landed from New York, and here's the video of me from New York. So it's pretty good.
Yeah, I saw it also, and he looks great, first of all, which is in television kind of important. And he was great, of course. I mean, his spot on Good Day New York, I think it is, really, really impressive. David is just great. And as you know, he's used by London radio, and he's on KCBS all the time. And, you just find David everywhere because he's just a remarkably gifted guy when it comes to analyzing legal situations and then communicating that analysis. I mean, that's so very important, too. So we'll get to that. Maybe my favorite story in the show, though, is none of those I've just mentioned. My favorite story in the show comes in the last segment, and that's with It's the Planet Stupid. It's the Planet Stupid is something that we do on Thursdays. We do a segment about the environment, about the planet, any number of things, It's not always about global warming or the climate crisis. It's about any number of things. There is a lawsuit going on in New York against Pepsi, and it's landmark, I think. But I'll let Belinda tell you about it. And it does involve the environment. And Pepsi is being sued for environmental damage. And this may be, we've always said on this show, the polluters, corporate polluters, corporations generally, big business that pollutes should own that pollution. You can't just take the profits and not own the cleanup.
How do they pollute?
Well, we'll get into, big business pollutes in a number of ways, but you mean in this specific case?
Pepsi, yeah.
No, well, maybe you should stay tuned and we'll get into that.
Oh, a teaser on the Mark Thompson Show,
well, that's what we do.
The Mark Thompson Show.
It's not with any pleasure that I tell you that last night late, as I worked here in this little studio, surrounded by the merch that you can purchase at getmarkmerch.com, the Holiday Blend Coachella Valley Coffee, which I drink every morning now through the holidays. It's absolutely delicious. Perfect. And you should get the 10% discount if you go to Coachella Valley Coffee with Mark T at checkout. There it is, 10% off. CoachellaValleyCoffee.com. We get you that 10% discount for a reason. Buy a bunch and buy whatever you want on the site and then take that 10% discount. But late last night as I worked here in the studio, something happened, Kim. I didn't even hear this thing fall, but it did. But then I heard the crunch when I stepped away like this.
Did you lose a mug?
Oh, no. A mug I can replace. The crunch was my credibility glasses.
No.
Yes. My credibility glasses are, I think, destroyed, but definitely unwearable now. And I've had to go to my backup credibility glasses.
Does it make you uncredible? Incredible?
What?
Incredibly
It doesn't.
uncredible?
It doesn't. One of those words might be dingable.
Yeah.
I don't think it affects my credibility, but it does affect my comfort. And there's something else. These are less expensive. They're still expensive glasses, I guess. I don't remember. I got them. Yeah. These are the glasses I keep by the bed in case there's a quake. You know how you keep stuff by the bed? You know, if
Guys
there's
do
a
that.
quake, your shoes are there. You know where everything is.
That's a dude thing. Specifically, I would argue for dudes from other states. If you grew up somewhere else, then you keep your shorts by the bed.
Oh, right.
Because you're of the earthquake. Whereas California guys, they don't care. They don't keep their stuff by the bed.
Maybe you're right. I mean,
Yeah.
I will tell you, having let me just put my credibility glasses on now. My backup credibility glasses. As long as it was not the Rod of Destiny. Yeah, that's true. That would be awful if we were to lose lose the rod. But I will tell you that. Well, we've evacuated twice because of fire, so maybe I'm more sensitive to that.
Yeah.
Your credibility is still very strong with those black frames. Bill says, "Thank you," but you'll notice the reflection here. How they're super reflective. That's because I just got basic glasses. You know, they were basic glasses that I could reach for and then I could wear if I had to evacuate. These don't reflect, you see. That way I can look at you and you can see my eyes. But again, so I have to replace these. It was a serious accident here in Mark Thompson land, and we're hopeful that I can find a pair like these. I got these in San Francisco on Market Street. And by the way, maybe tomorrow I'll tell you, we had multiple homeless with like people who are disconnected from reality, homeless harassment situations happen within 20 minutes. And it ruined the whole morning, and we just abandoned everything we were going to do. That happened already this morning. That for maybe tomorrow, because we're running way behind already. But anyway, that's a little look at what's happening. Now let's play the game. All right. So,
The Mark Thompson Show.
I'm tempted, Tony, with your indulgence, sir. Can we start with law and disorder, and then I will move to chunk of Trump and the strategy that Joe Biden will likely have to employ to take down the former president. And then we'll get to Boden. So we'll start with law and disorder. Is that cool with you, Tony?
Sounds good.
All right.
In the criminal justice system, the people,
pimps, addicts, thieves, bums, winos, girls who can't keep an address, and men who don't care,
are represented by two separate yet equally important groups.
A cop, a flatfoot, a bull, a dick, John Law. You're the fuzz, the heat, you're poison, you're trouble, you're bad news.
These are their stories.
Happening now in so many different places, and this craziness this morning on the Bay Bridge in San Francisco is, I think, wasn't it shut down for some time today with protesters?
A couple hours. Mm-hmm.
In Southern California,
to cars and they threw their keys into the bay.
Is that right?
Yeah.
I just think that you win over no one that way. But this from before we start, okay, Lori. Lori is a terrific supporter. Isn't this Lori from
Lori from Above the Bar.
Above the
Absolutely.
Bar, right? I just was checking. Can't quite see as well with these glasses. Okay.
She says, was that Mark we heard the other day whilst killing our brain cells watching world's most shocking moments caught on tape? We couldn't stop watching just to hear your voice.
Well, first of all, thank you for the $10
big shout out
super chat from the Red Jack Saloon, which we love in San Francisco. Yes, world's most shocking moments caught on tape. I don't know, maybe I don't remember that being the title, but they might have renamed it. I did do Most Shocking, I think is what it was called. So maybe that's the full, it was called Most Shocking. I did like 5 seasons of that show. So they've repurposed it, and
Do you know who I am? Yeah. I'm kind of a big deal.
I'm the voice of Most Shocking. Nice to see you, everyone. Yeah, they did that show and a couple of others that were spinoffs. But yes, well, thank you, Lori, for I received no residuals. I think it was a buyout on that for those who were curious. But nonetheless, I'm so appreciative. Thank you, Lori, for that. Now, on with law and disorder. I was mentioning big protests in San Francisco. They closed down the Bay Bridge, essentially, over the situation in the Middle East. They want a ceasefire, of course. And the way they've decided to make that point is by stopping traffic in Los Angeles, in San Francisco, and other major cities. Major protests in Washington. There was also a major protest against Hamas in Washington. But in the midst of all of this, somebody died. A Moore Park college professor now arrested on suspicion of involuntary manslaughter in the death of a Jewish protester who suffered head injuries during clashes between pro-Palestinian and pro-Israel demonstrators. That was earlier this month in Thousand Oaks, California, which is Southern California. This Loe Al-Naji, who's 50 years old, of Moore Park, was arrested. It just happened early this morning. Paul Kessler is the guy who died. And Al-Naji is being held in lieu of $1 million bail. What happened was, it seems, that Kessler was part of a pro-Israel group protesting opposite a Free Palestine rally and fell during a confrontation between the two groups. When he fell, he struck the ground, and that caused him to start bleeding out. And because of the blunt force, he died, and it was ruled a homicide. So there was some kind of confrontation between the two. And as a result, Kessler falls back and he passes away. Fatal injury to the back of his head, consistent with and typical of injuries sustained from a fall. Non-lethal injuries on the left side of his face, and you go on with the description. But
the question was he pushed by this man, or did he trip over the curb and fall on his own on accident? But the coroner ruled the death a homicide, so.
Right. And they cobble this together based on witness accounts as well. Now, they're saying that there was no criminal intent, but nonetheless, he is being charged with involuntary manslaughter. In other words, he was involved in the altercation, even though he didn't intend, they're suggesting, based on events that they're able to cobble together, to kill anybody. And I guess Anaji is a professor. And it's yet again a serious result of these protests, which you hope will be peaceful, but they can be full of passion and emotion, and stuff happens that wasn't intended, and that's exactly, it would appear, kind of what happened.
Yesterday, an incident at the right outside of the APEC confines, where there were protesters on one side, and somebody that had something to do with APEC gets involved with these protesters and punches a woman right in the face. And the man ends up getting arrested. Passions are high and tempers flare. And people need to know they have to be held accountable. You can't just go around hitting people and committing violence.
This is true. This is true. Meanwhile, in Law and Disorder, we change gears. The mother of that 6-year-old boy who shot his first-grade teacher in Virginia earlier this year, sentenced yesterday. 21 months in prison for using marijuana while owning a firearm. I didn't even know that was a thing, Deja Taylor's son, who has not been identified, shot first-grade teacher Abigail Zwerner. That happened right after the first of the year, January 6th. In Newport News, Virginia. Authorities have said the boy used his mother's gun and shot Zwerner while she was reading to students in her classroom. She was shot in the hand and chest. Now, you'll remember, she has sued. She filed a $40 million lawsuit against the school. And she's arguing gross negligence in court because there was a warning, both from the teacher and from others, about the danger associated with this 6-year-old kid. But now the mother has been sentenced. It's always, there's such irresponsibility associated with not protecting that gun such that kids can't get it. You've got a 6-year-old in the house, and somehow he's able to get that weapon. It's crazy. But anyway, 21 months in prison for using marijuana while owning the firearm. I guess that was one of those cases they cobbled together. Meantime, fraud is fun, says a teen hacker who hacked into DraftKings. You know DraftKings, Kim, because you're a gambling fool.
Of course,
loving
yes.
that gambling on sports.
That's right.
Fraud is fun, says this teenager, a Wisconsin teenager, admitting in New York federal court to orchestrating the 2022 hack on the DraftKings fantasy sports betting site. It drained money from about 1,600 customer accounts. I want to say on the positive side, I'm pretty enterprising young teenager to hack in and siphon off that kind of money.
Fraud is fun is going to win you any points with the judge. You know,
I don't think, that's probably not a quote you want back. Madison
not
resident
quite
Joseph
remorse.
Garrison. He faces up to 5 years in prison. That's a tough way to spend your teenage years. After pleading guilty, conspiracy to commit computer intrusion was the charge, and fraud is fun. I'm addicted to seeing money in my account, is what he wrote in an electronic message to a co-conspirator. Ooh. Well, I love a good conspiracy and a good heist plan, but I would encourage kids not to do that. Go with the old school way of ripping people off. How about this on Rodeo Drive? The part of Beverly Hills is where the elite, the rich, the glitterati, where they all associate. The FBI says that this guy sold luxury watches on Rodeo Drive and scammed customers out of $3 million.
Ooh, it's a wild idea, but it just might
Well,
work.
it did work for a while. Anthony Farrar's...
Is he open up his coat and then, you see the watches inside? Because that's what he looks like in that picture. Look at him with his coat and his glasses, like, open up the coat. Here's what I have for sale. No.
He ran a place called the Timepiece Gentleman, had a storefront on the city's fabled Rodeo Drive. He had a Lamborghini that was red, a Ducati motorcycle. I think he had a couple of Ducatis that sat outside this lavish rental in Santa Monica. So he was living large. He made frequent gambling trips to Las Vegas. He spent tens of thousands of dollars on those trips. He's 35 years old. He collected Patek Philippe's, Rolexes, and other pricey timepieces, and he sold them to collectors. The typical agreement with his clients gave him a 5% commission on every sale. Business was thriving. His clients thought business was thriving anyway. He displayed watches worth up to $430,000 on his social media sites. He had 300,000 followers on Instagram, Kim.
That's a lot.
Well, it all came crashing down, Kim. It's not a happy thing.
Oh.
But FBI agents arrested him last week for scamming customers out of $3 million by selling their fancy watches and then pocketing the proceeds. It was not...
What?
I know. It was not part of the plan.
Wait,
Essentially,
so you take your watch to him to sell it. He sells it. He takes the money. You're out the watch and the money?
Yep. It's a...
Ooh, it's a wild idea, but it just might work.
It does work for a while. It's kind of Ponzi-ish. It's a Ponzi-type scheme. Multiple victims contacted law enforcement to report that they wired funds to him for the purchase of a watch or mailed him a watch to consign for sale, but then were never paid for the watch or never got the watch back. So the U.S. Attorney's Office of the Central District of California is involved, the FBI is involved, and Ferrer is in trouble. He is probably going to lose the Lamborghini, the Ducatis, and all the rest. And my friends, law and order comes crashing to a halt as Ferrer is under arrest.
Tune in again next time for more Law and Disorder on The Mark Thompson Show.
All right, that's it. Let's roll. Hey, let's be careful out there.
With your blessing, Tony, I'd like to get right into a chunk of Trump. Can I do it?
Sure.
All right. Without further delay,
The Mark Thompson Show.
Kim, you don't like that idea?
Well, I don't know. How long is the chunk of Trump?
Look at you, Kim.
Kim, how are you?
Yeah, I just saw the time. I mean,
no, what time is it?
It's 11:30.
I've got
I'm thinking
Boden waiting.
Chunk of
the
Trump
king of
has
game
to
shows waiting. Is that what you're
press
telling me?
pause on the chunk of Trump because we've got the king of game shows. I don't know how you keep him waiting. I mean, that's just ridiculous.
All right. All right. So let me just then ask you, Kim.
Yes.
Since apparently you're running the show.
Well, you put me in the producer's position, all week long, and then I'm just supposed to take off the hat willingly? I don't know.
You do sit in the lifeguard chair, apparently, or the referee chair. So, Kim, where do I run Chunk of Trump? I must run it today because I have thoughts, and I wanted to share the single strategy by which Joe Biden really has to employ a single strategy to beat Donald Trump.
I can give you 4 minutes if you can do it in 4 minutes.
Well, I'll tell you what no. I'm looking at the show now, and I'm seeing a spot before Belinda, maybe.
Okay, that sounds good. We could do that.
Okay, so it's now or before Belinda, Kim. Which
Kim, how are you?
Because that means that Katz has to wrap in time. So I'm asking you, do you think that that's going to happen?
Katz never wraps in time. I'd
I
say,
know.
Yeah,
Okay.
probably right now. Do it right now.
All right, Tony. Bowden will understand. He's a pro. He understands. So he'll kick it in the green room. No
I
big
don't
deal.
know. I just saw that right there. He did the.
He's like, I don't know.
What does he say? No.
He did
says no. Don't. He says cut it. Oh, is that right?
cut
That's
it.
Bowden.
He's a real
big
producer, not
executive.
like me.
Maybe we should do
Yeah,
what he
that's
says.
true. We should have him produce the show.
Oh my
Get
God.
him in here.
Well, I don't know what to.
Whoever is producing this thing has no idea what they're doing.
All right. Here's what we're going to do. First of all, I want to clear this courtroom. What we're going to do is Kim will do a little news capsule.
What?
Then we'll bring on the king of game shows, Bob Boden, for a palate cleanser, followed by Katz. But if Katz runs behind, I'll slip the chunk of Trump in right after that. I think that's likely what's going to happen. So you'll get your chunk of Trump. I promise all of you, you Trumpies and anti-Trumpies, you'll get it. So smash the like button like a boss.
It with your iron rod.
Show us a little love. It costs you nothing. Mark Thompson Show.
The Mark Thompson Show.
On the Mark Thompson Show, I'm Kim McAllister. This report is sponsored by Tenuta Vineyards, where you can get 10% off just for being a Mark Thompson Show listener. Unfortunately, we are going to start with some pretty sad news this morning, because what we know is that the body of one of the hostages taken from Israel has been found. Here is a photo. This is a picture of a woman named Yehudit Weiss. This hostage abducted by Hamas found dead in a structure near Gaza's main hospital. That, according to Israeli forces, Yehudit Weiss was taken from her home October 7th when Hamas launched attacks on Israel. Weiss's body was identified by medical personnel and her family was informed of her death on Thursday. Israeli forces also said weapons and grenades were found in that same structure where Weiss's body was found as well. So a sad outcome there.
I think she was a peace activist, too. A lot of these people who are hostages or found dead were peace activists. It's so bizarre.
So sad. I just, it
The whole
breaks
situation is just
It's
so awful.
It's awful. So, speaking of this war and this conflict, though, I do have to tell you about this protest, a pro-Palestinian rally outside the D.C. headquarters of the Democratic National Committee. It turned violent last night. We were talking, Mark, about these protests turning violent. About 150 people were outside calling for a ceasefire in this ongoing Israel-Hamas war when a clash erupted with the police, leading to 6 officers being injured, with 1 person being arrested. Police evacuated the DNC headquarters, including the Democratic House lawmakers as well.
How ironic is that? You are protesting for peace,
yes,
and so you get into a major altercation with the cops or with other protesters. It's so effing ironic and awful.
We know that a verdict has been reached in the trial of the man accused of attacking the husband of former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi. David DePape faces life behind bars if he is convicted on the federal charges. He could be seen on police video attacking Paul Pelosi in last year. The jury started deliberating yesterday, and today, again, we know there is a verdict. More than half of Democrats want another candidate to challenge President Biden in the party's primary. That, according to a new Yahoo YouGov poll, it found 54% of the Democratic voters want another Democrat to challenge President Biden in 2024. 28% of Democrats say they're opposed to a challenger. 2 New Yorkers facing charges for allegedly being behind what authorities say is the largest seizure of counterfeit goods in U.S. history. The U.S. Attorney's Office says agents recently found $1 billion worth of fake handbags, clothing, shoes, and luxury products at a Manhattan storage facility. About 219,000 fake items were discovered. Wow. Pandas could be headed back to the United States. Chinese President Xi Jinping hinted at the animals returning to the country while at a dinner last night in San Francisco.
Oh, that's because of the new bromance between Joe Biden and Xi.
Right. And
they were all angry, and now they took their pandas, and now they're saying, oh, maybe we can get the pandas back to you.
They're a symbol of friendship. Right? This comes after 3 giant pandas at the National Zoo in Washington had to be returned to China earlier this month, leaving Zoo Atlanta as the only place in the U.S. where visitors can see pandas. But now
imagine
we
how
might
the
get
pandas feel. They're being, like shuffled back and forth to
pandas
China. It's like that's not an easy
flight. Leave us out of it. Yes.
Yeah, I'd say.
I've told you it's never easy being in this business.
All right. Well.
This report is sponsored by Tenuta Vineyards in Livermore, where you can sip a beautiful flight of wine, have a little something on a Thursday afternoon. It's gorgeous at Tenuta, and you get the 10% off for being a Mark Thompson Show listener. 925-499-4576. You call Rich, you say smash it with your iron rod, and you get your 10% off the Mark Thompson Why Are You Yelling Red, the Hey, Which One of You is Mark Thompson Pinot Grigio, and so much more. I'm Kim McAllister. This is The Mark Thompson Show.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Shadow Stevens. This is The Mark Thompson Show. Keep it to yourself.
Who's Mark Thompson?
Wow. I'm so excited. One of the things I was most excited about today is about to happen. I'm going to introduce you to a guy who is a major name in the world of game shows. And game shows are now making an incredible resurgence across primetime network television, even in the streaming universe. And we'll find out why. And some of the shows he's worked on, everything from Family Feud to $25,000 Pyramid to, didn't they change it? Now it's, I'll have to ask you, it's like, it used to be $25,000, now they made it $100,000, now it's like $1 million Pyramid, whatever. They keep increasing the price on the Pyramid and everything else. It's a great pleasure to have him join us. Bob Boden, everybody. Bob, how much is the Pyramid now? It's $100,000 right now?
100,000, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Now, Bob, you are... Let me put my credibility glasses on, Bob. You are in this place, which is your office, which is a monument to all of these game shows. You are a legit game show fan. This isn't some, you didn't see a business opportunity here. You have an abiding interest in this world of game shows, love of game shows.
I am still doing what I love. I'm so fortunate to still be producing game shows 45 years after I started in television.
Crazy. What was your first exposure to a game show in person? Like, did you go as a, as a fan, as an audience member? Yeah. I mean, or is that right?
I grew up in New York, and there were still many game shows that were taped in New York when I was a kid. And I would go down into the city and get tickets for the different shows. And I remember saying to my mom, hey, when I turned 6, I'm allowed to go to see Password because it said minimum age 6. So I said, when I become 6, can we see Password? So she took me to Password when I was 6, and I'll never forget that day. Honestly, I remember looking at this incredible stage and hearing the sound effects and the music and watching the game. And I remember saying to my mom, "This is what I want to do when I grow up."
Wow.
Uh,
Wow.
Never look back.
And around you, as I was kind of saying, is a piece of what is an enormous room that is filled with the kind of memorabilia from both your childhood and beyond. Meaning you have, I'll call them sort of relics from stage sets, from shows like this, from Password. Look, we're just showing a little bit of the old Password. And you've got like the original Price is Right platform where they're there for the Showcase Showdown, right? I mean, you've collected all of this through the years.
Yes, it started when I was working at CBS, and they were retiring a game from The Price is Right. They were rebuilding it. It's a game they still play. It's called Any Number. It was the first game they ever played on this new version, and they were going to toss the set in the trash. And I was working upstairs from where they taped, and I said, "Is there any chance that you could wheel that up to my office? I'd like to keep it." And they said, "Well, sure, we're just going to throw it out." So they took it up to my office, and when I left the network, I took it with me, and that's what started my collection. And my collection includes all kinds of things that were headed for the dumpster that I just felt a need to preserve. And now I'm a co-founder of the National Archives of Game Show History, which will be a real place to preserve this in a museum, the Strong National Museum of Play in Rochester, New York. They are dedicated to all things play, and everything in my collection in this room will eventually go to this archive so that future generations can enjoy it. That's the board right there.
That's it. That really is. I mean, you're amazing. That is, so Boden has that in this big room, which is like a little mini museum to game shows. By the way, our ding is, which you may recognize, Bob Boden. We ding oftentimes on this show big SAT type words. So when somebody uses an SAT words, we'll ding it. And that ding comes from, that's Family Feud, I believe. Yeah.
No, the ding on Family Feud's a little different.
It's what is it? What do you think this ding is then?
That's more of like a Price is Right type of ding.
Oh.
Or a pyramid. It's actually more of a pyramid ding.
It's more of a pyramid ding, Tony. I always thought it was Family Feud.
Tony, that's a pyramid ding. The Family Feud sound is known as that's known as the clang. Okay, so here, that's the.
Oh,
clang.
You're right. Yes.
Yeah.
The clang.
That's
wow, look at you, man.
Don't
all right,
get
Bob.
your things and your clangs mixed up, Mark. It's really embarrassing.
What a rookie mistake.
Yeah.
So there has been this resurgence of game shows right now on primetime television and across the streaming universe as well. I wonder if you could just give us, I mean, you've been in television for so long as an executive, running companies, also running all of these different games. Tell me, if you would please, and running networks, but for that matter, over at Fox, tell me, if you will, what's happening to television and then how game shows fit into that and why there's such a resurgence.
Well, in the broadest possible sense, we're living in a very turbulent time, and game shows provide happy. They're a place where you can escape. They're a place where you can interact with your television or whatever platform you watch them on, and it's a place where you can be a part of the show, not just watch it, not just be a spectator, but you can guess the answers to the questions. You can guess the price of the items. You can enjoy the interaction that people have with each other on a relationship game show. There's no way you can watch a half-hour Family Feud without yelling at your television set. It's impossible. You can't do it. So that I think helps people escape from all the tough stuff that's going on in the world today. And then add on top of that the strikes that we just endured, and the broadcast networks in particular needed additional programming. Game shows have always been appealing to programmers because they're cheaper than than most scripted programming, certainly dramas and sitcoms. They can get up and running much faster. So, you know, you can, when we did a show together called Greed back in '99, and we pitched that show at the end of August in '99, and 10 weeks to the day we pitched it, it was on television.
Oh yeah, Tony, find a little Greed. That was a great show. It was in the shadow of Millionaire.
Yeah.
And then it took off on its own. It felt very kind of intense like Millionaire. But
yeah, it was in the era of drama in game shows. You know, Millionaire really defined the new era of game shows with a big dramatic set and the lighting effects and the sound effects. And Greed and some other shows came a little bit later, but played off that same sort of emotional impact that game shows prior to that had not really had that much of.
I'm curious, I'm going to ask Bob in a second, but I'm curious in the chat, like what your favorite game show has been or is to the audience. But I'll ask Bob his favorite in a second. I'm sure he loves all game shows, but maybe he has a couple of favorites. But I'm also curious about something else you just referred to, which was there was a little piece of Greed. If those who are watching on YouTube, it was hosted by Chuck Woolery, and I did the announce on the show, which is really it was really cool. It was a very sort of intense, and you know tonight, one contestant in one. It was like that from Los Angeles. It was like one of those big reads. The play along value. You talk about that yelling at the TV.
Yeah.
Game shows have to have that, right?
Oh, yes, absolutely. If a game show comes on the air and you are merely watching it, it's probably not a great show. It's got to be something that engages your viewing experience to a higher level where you're actually participating. And whether it's, I wish I was on that show and I wish I could win the refrigerator or the car, it's either that or it's just enjoying it. And if you think about Jeopardy, there's a question about Jeopardy. One of the secrets of Jeopardy, which is pretty well known in our business, is that people say Jeopardy, oh, that's a really hard show, but not all of it is difficult. If you look at a column of a category of clues, at the top, you're probably going to know the top couple of clues, and you're going to get it before the contestant. You're going to feel smart. And so you're going to say, oh, I know that, and yell it out. In the middle of the board, maybe you know it, maybe you don't. But when you hear it, you're going to say, oh, I knew that. Yeah, I really knew that. And then at the bottom, maybe it's too difficult and you don't know it, but you learn it. And then you tell someone, did you know that? And so it starts with, I know it, then it's, I knew that, then it's, I didn't know that. And all of that happens in every category on Jeopardy. And I think that's the secret to it being on for, more than 40 years now.
I don't know what this is. I used to love Remote Control on MTV, though for the life of me, I can't actually remember the premise of it. Heather says. That was a weird one. That was Ken Ober hosted it, and I think Jenny McCarthy was on it. And
no, she was on Singled Out.
Singled Out. Sorry, yeah, okay.
But it was a TV trivia game show, and it was an homage to classic TV. There was a huge bobblehead of Bob Eubanks,
I don't remember.
Host of the Newlywed Game, it was a show that I think really appealed to not just the classic MTV viewer, which is, younger people, teenagers and so forth, but also to their parents who would play along. And it really helped define MTV in the early days.
Homage is a ding word. See? The Gong Show was the best show, best game. Oh, there's Remote Control. Thank you. Good hustle. Whoever came up with the Jeopardy theme song needs star on Hollywood Walk of Fame, says Aussie. Who wrote the
well, that was Merv Griffin, who invented the show. And in the original version, which was on NBC from 64 to 75, that theme was only heard at the end during Final Jeopardy. When the show came back in the 80s, the current version, it became the main theme of the show, and it's still heard in the end game, almost in the precise notes from the original.
That's wild. This is I like this. The Gong Show was the best game show ever, says Phineas. I wanted to ask you about the Gong Show, because that was really just more of a party, it seemed, wasn't it? What was it?
Yeah, it was a celebration of talent, but not all the talent was good talent. Some of it was bad and would get gonged. Some of it was so bad that it didn't get gonged because they were enjoying how bad it was. And it was from the bizarre mind of Chuck Barris. There he is. Who wound
it felt rebellious too, like America's Got Talent, which is also a talent show, doesn't feel rebellious. I mean, it's got its own grandeur and coolness, but this felt rebellious. Maybe was that the 70s that Gong Show was on, or 80s?
Late 70s,
yeah.
But it was in the style of Chuck Barris, who was rebellious in other ways. He created the dating game, which really redefined daytime game shows and allowed a lot of social mores like dating come out into the open, and added a sort of a sexiness to daytime programming that prior to that really wasn't a part of game shows. Game shows were much more, traditional at that time, questions and answers and buzzers and bells and clangs, because they're different, and then he did the Newlywed Game, and the Newlywed Game was relatable to any couple that's in a relationship, and you were answering the questions along with the couples and enjoying their answers. So
what is the date we're in now, Bob, as we kind of wrap up? Give me a sense of, like, you've kind of taken me through, and I didn't even realize it at the time. I was just sort of, as a consumer of game shows, you took us through the drama game shows, the fun game. So where are we now with game shows? As I say, there's been this resurgence. Is there a genre specifically?
Well, at last count, I believe there are 25 first-run game shows on television right now between daytime and prime time, and that covers broadcast and cable and streaming. And there's at least 3 more coming on in January that have been announced. I think game shows are now a fixture of prime time. It used to be, after the Scandal era in the 50s, they sort of disappeared. And after Millionaire came on in '99, there were little roller coaster trends of game shows. There were a lot, and then there weren't that many. But I think they're here to stay, and they're cheaper to produce. They're easier to get up and running. They repeat very well, and they're relatable. They're really authentic, real TV. It is the real foundation of reality television. Is game shows, and many of the reality competition shows had their roots in game shows.
Yeah. Somebody was asking how the Price is Right contestants are. They pick them right out of the line. They interview them. I have a story. We don't have time for it today, I don't think, but of my friends being pulled out of the line. But they, when you're interviewed and any kind of casting for game shows, you want that enthusiasm. You have to have that. Otherwise, you're not. They don't put a lot of duds on the air as contestants. The question I have for you is about now your favorites. I mean, we've talked about a bunch. What are your favorite game shows, both now and through time?
Well, my current favorite is Funny You Should Ask, because I produce it and it pays my mortgage. So,
right, of course. Let's leave out the stuff that you're involved with now.
Oh well, then forget it.
No, of course. Funny You Should Ask, and then what else?
Right. And a thank you to Byron Allen for making me a part of this and letting me follow my dream all these many years later. There it is. There's Miss Louie.
Miss Louie for sure.
Oh, the pilot. Okay. Historically, I'm a big fan of The Price is Right, because The Price is Right to me is so much more than a game show. It's really a variety show. And there are over 70 games now that are in rotation that test people's knowledge of pricing, of prices and pricing, and it's just such a wonderful adrenaline-filled hour. And an old favorite that's back that I loved when I worked on it, and I love it even more now, is Press Your Luck. Press Your Luck. It's on ABC on Tuesday nights. It is a roller coaster of emotions. It is so much fun to watch. The production values are very high, and it looks great. It sounds great. Elizabeth Banks is an amazing host, and I just love every minute of it. I go to tapings when they're in town, and I just can't get enough of Press Your Luck. I love it. There it is.
It's terrific. Yeah, they brought it back. It was a hit. The first, was it Peter Tamarkin who was the host the first time around?
Yes,
yeah.
Very good. You get a clang for that.
I got.
No, Peter Tamarkin. We all miss Peter, but the current version is just spectacular. It's so good.
Well, I mean, it's wild too to see this new crop of game shows come up, and sort of the nostalgic game shows reemerge. I mean, there are cool new game shows like The Wall. I thought was kind of cool. And these sort of larger than life game shows. But then as you bring back these franchises, I thought The Chase was fun. Yeah, were you involved in with the Chase? I think,
I was
right?
involved in the GSN version of the Chase. Yeah.
It was good. But anyway, but then to see Press Your Luck and the enduring aspects of Jeopardy and Family Feud. I mean, these are just it's incredible. And Wheel is just so solid.
You're talking the 5 legacy shows today are Wheel of Fortune, Jeopardy, Price is Right, Let's Make a Deal, and Family Feud. And all of them have been on longer than 40 years, several of them more than 50 years. And these are formats that just will never go away. They will be on for our children, our grandchildren, our great-grandchildren, and for many generations to come.
Well, it's really cool to talk to you, Bob. I shot a video in Bob's office, which is kind of like a museum. And I'm going to push it to Tony, who will make it beautiful. And then we'll put it up as a separate video so everybody who watches our channel, you'll get it dropped as a separate video. It will not air because it's sort of long. But Bob actually takes me through the office with all of these. We only had time to do, a fraction of what's there, but it's really cool. And I just think you said it. There's something happy about game shows. There's something nostalgic. It just reminds us of a connection we felt, and it's a really special place to be working in. So I congratulate you, because to still be rocking it for all of this time, it's really great, and your work is really special. So congratulations, pal. Really nice.
Thank you, Mark. It's been great to work with you and to do your show now, and the future is ours.
Yeah, come back and visit again. Yeah,
Thanks
there you go.
playing.
Bob Boden, everybody. Bye, Bob.
Bye.
Wow, that's cool.
The Mark Thompson Show.
Love my Bob Boden. And that was cool. Everybody does truly have a favorite. In the chat, it was tough to see. By the way, I saw Gene Rayburn mentioned. Here it is. Jim says Gene Rayburn's microphone was so skinny. So Bob, in addition to all of these other artifacts he has from the game show community, he has Gene Rayburn's original microphone from the Match game, which was this long, thin microphone. And in fact, Bob told me that the reason they made it long and thin, and you'll see this in the video because I'll push it to Tony, as I say, and we'll put it up there, but that Rayburn got tired of holding the mic up like this, so they just got a longer mic, so he could just rest his hand down here in the mic. It's a funny reason, and then of course that became this signature thing that he had this long, thin microphone. So,
and that was before lapel mics or something.
I think there were lapel mics, but for some reason, the host had. There it is. You see that long, thin microphone? It was. But it became a total signature thing that he had.
That's funny.
Yeah, really wild. It's really wild as a host to audition for them too. You go in and audition for these shows, which I don't do anymore, but I used to do that, and it's just different because you don't know. Some shows they want you to be funny. Some shows, it's all about the game, and then some shows are in between. And you're trying to distinguish yourself from other contestants. From other auditioners, people who want that. So pretty crazy, but that was really fun. Nice little dip through it. And Tony, I'll get you that video, and then if you can, make it presentable, we'll get that going.
Thanks, Tony.
Yeah.
Chris
Smash.
wants to know what
what's
was
that?
the one with Howie Mandel and the suitcases full of cash.
Oh yeah, that's Deal or No Deal.
Ah.
Deal or No Deal was such a basic concept. One of these cases has $1 million in it, right? And the others don't, but some of them have a lot of money in them. So you pick out one at the beginning, and then slowly they're eliminated, and the banker who you don't see, offers you deals all along the way. So deal or no deal. Do you want to give up your briefcase? You don't know what's in it. Do you want to give it up for $100,000? And of course, the audience is always urging you never to take the deal.
Well, you have a sure thing versus the unknown. I'd always go for the sure thing.
Right. Well,
right. How much of a gambler are you?
It's weird though when you get into that environment. I'm sure Bob would say, "Yeah, you say you go for the sure thing, but then everybody around you is telling you, and they play that up. I mean, the whole show essentially is all that,
Yeah.
But that, that was Deal or No Deal.
John wants to know, have you ever tried to host a show, Mark? Have you ever called upon you to host the show and not just be the voice of the show?
First of all, John, thank you for the question, but how dare you? Because
Do you know who I am?
I'm
kind of a big deal.
I did host a show. I've hosted a few shows, but the game show I hosted is actually a sad tale.
Oh,
I shall share it with you now. Not the show, which was, I thought, had a lot of good elements. I see some things that could have been improved. But I did a show called, this is what I remember. Maybe I've done a bunch more. I don't know. But the most recently, I did a show for Fremantle. They do American Idol, and they do Price is Right and a bunch of other stuff. And actually, this show was supposed to come on after American Idol, originally. It was being held off. It was called Hole in the Wall. And Hole in the Wall, I should bring Boden back for this. Is Boden still in the green room?
He's still there. Yeah, let's take him in.
Bob, you remember Hole in the Wall? I did Hole in the Wall, hosted that.
Here's the trophy that you won.
Oh, look at that.
Hole in the Wall.
So Hole in the Wall, first of all, it was the biggest at the time, the biggest game show audience in game show history. 650 people were in the audience.
Yeah.
Which was, I don't know if you needed that, but that was the kind of thing. It was like an arena kind of thing.
Yeah.
And these walls came at the contestants, right, Bob? And they were cutouts.
Yeah. Yeah. It was a cutout in a different shape every time. And the contestants had to configure their bodies to fit within the cutout. And some of them were pretty easy. And then as the show progressed, it got more and more difficult, and you had to contort yourself. And it was a really fun spectacle, because if you failed, you got pushed into a pool of water.
Yeah, the wall would hit you, and you just get pushed into this big pool of water. It was pretty great, and they were all wearing these tight silver suits, as I recall. But my note for it was some of the walls, as they were revealed, I thought, there's just no way that person can make it through. Like, you have to make it doable, I thought. That was my one flaw with the show, I felt.
Yeah.
Like, you can see how you get caught on it and and you go into the water. So, I hosted that show with Brooke Burns, who's very talented, and I think hosts a show now.
Brooke Burns. I did the chase with her.
Yeah, she's really great. So I had so much fun with her, and that was a fun show. But that was a show I did. I don't think I've hosted. I don't know. I hosted a bunch of stuff, the Knievel jumps and all the rest. But for pure game, I think that was it. Hole in the Wall, and it was the line. There you go. They made it through. Yeah, it's time to face the hole. I remember was the signature line on the show. Yeah.
How long did that show air?
Oh, here's the sad part. Okay, I told you it was a sad story. So they were going to hold it off. It was going to premiere after American Idol, which would have, I think, just catapulted it into the stratosphere, potentially anyway. I mean, it's not a bad place to be, right? But another show called Wipeout, which I think is still on, was doing so well. And it was, again, a big physical show. that they rushed it onto the schedule. And because you rush a show onto the schedule, there's no promotion, there's no buildup. I mean, it was crazy. I was literally, we've got to get the show on. Wipeout's so hot, and we have our own Wipeout. So they rushed it onto the schedule, no promotion. I remember the game in the East, an NFL game, it's premiered on a Sunday night.
Yeah.
It ran late, I think, Bob, right? And then, so the East only saw part of the show.
Yeah.
And then it just died. It was just sad. And then they just burn off the other ones. So how long did it last?
The way they're...
It fell into a hole.
I like the way their butts look in the silver suits, though. That's funny.
How about a clang and a ding for Bob Boden? All right, Bob, thanks, pal. Thanks for reliving my misery. Appreciate it. Good. Thanks for playing. We have a home version of the Mark Thompson Show for you. So thank you, Bob Boden.
The Mark Thompson Show.
All right, I have a minute or two before David Katz joins and we get serious. I wonder if I could share with you this Biden strategy, which is out there for his reelection. Might now be a good time to do it, Kim, since you apparently are running this show and I'm just the right.
Please, Kim, how are you?
All right, so let me now speak to what's happening in the presidential race.
The Mark Thompson Show.
It's an interesting column that came out. There have been a bunch of columns advising Joe Biden as to how to win this bizarre election. I say bizarre because it's strange to me in a country like America, although America is certainly a different country than it was even 10 years ago, that an embattled, divisive figure like Donald Trump could lead in as many polls as he does. And Biden, would be the oldest president ever, is having to face the age issue and other issues sort of attendant to it, meaning because of his age, you have to look at the vice president in a different way. There are all of these, as I say, issues adjacent to the main issue. So there have been columns and many pundits who are offering advice to Biden along the lines of, you got to make nice with other high-profile Democrats who are influence makers, David Axelrod among them, this kind of thing. But I thought this was a good take, and it comes out of Jonah Goldberg at the LA Times. And he speaks to the fact that Biden is behind in polls, but there was just an election, as you know. The polls were earlier this month saying that Trump would be the preferred candidate between Biden and Trump. But then when Democrats got the wins in Virginia and Kentucky, also Ohio about a woman's right to choose, right? It seemed as though, maybe some of these issues will carry the day and Biden might carry the day as well. So what Goldberg's suggesting is that dissatisfaction with the Biden-Trump choice is inviting competition. And as of now, a third-party run would be doomed, but you could see how Cornel West, Jill Stein, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., I've got a great story about RFK Jr. for tomorrow. I mean, it's a great story. Or even Joe Manchin with the no labels candidacy lingering. They could take off enough voters from the Biden side of the ledger to guarantee Trump an electoral college victory. Even though Kennedy could take anti-vaxxers who sometimes fall into the Trump camp, so there would be some siphoning off of those votes. But he's pointing out that Biden's dilemma, and seriously, his only strategy and his only path out, Goldberg says, is a quote, can be found in the fact that he's lost support from both the anti-Trump forces and moderate Republicans. Significant numbers of youth, Black, and Latino Democrats have turned sour on Joe Biden. And so have independents. In July of 2021, before the Afghanistan withdrawal, Biden had 61% support among independents. Now it's just 37%. So the response to these dismal numbers from Democrats, at least in public, is to point out that President Obama was also polling very badly during the same period in 2011, and yet Obama went on to beat his opponent, Senator Mitt Romney, handily. He says, well, fair enough, but does anyone think that Biden can campaign the way that Obama did? I mean, do they think that he has a special bond with young and minority voters that Obama had? Because of Biden's, quote, age, which is a catch-all label for his chronological age, but also his mental acuity, his energy level, which is also, it's all implied. The Biden campaign is already contemplating a Rose Garden strategy to mirror the 2020 basement strategy. And here it is, the strategy. The difference between now and then is that Biden had COVID to justify running, from the basement in 2020. Now avoiding the campaign trail may be conspicuous. And as he says, will simply reinforce the idea that he doesn't have the energy to hit the stump. So the president's only path to solidify and expand the anti-Trump coalition is to play the anti-Trump card. Not the pro-Biden card. Not the look what I've done card. We talk a lot on this show, and different people swim in and out and say, Biden's got to get out there. He's got to be able to message what he's done. The infrastructure bill, the green energy stuff. Sure, he's okayed drilling here and there, but he's really been a far more future-thinking president. And when you look at the future and the crises that we face from an environmental standpoint, Biden is better than the alternative. And look what he's done. But it's suggested here by Goldberg that the pro-Biden coalition is not where you should play it. You need the anti-Trump vote again, and that's your only chance. The newly energetic abortion rights supporters, you need them to show up. It's very hard to see, Goldberg says, how Biden can manage to make a lot of Democrats very excited to vote for him. But he can make them excited to vote, what? Against Donald Trump. So Jonah Goldberg says, expect to hear, don't compare me to the almighty. Compare me to the alternative. Expect to hear that a lot in the next year. That was a favorite quote of Biden, and it's likely that you'll hear it in the year ahead. Again, I always say the perfect is the enemy of the good, and Biden says, don't compare me to the almighty, compare me to the alternative. He'll have to rally enough voters who care about some of these issues to which I've just referred and who fear the loss of democracy from an autocrat who has stated his goal, which is to remain in power and to essentially seize control of all the other levers of power within Washington, the Justice Department, the Supreme Court, et cetera. They're going to have to emphasize that and the anti-Trump vote in order to carry the White House. Biden got voted in 2020 because he wasn't Trump. Not sure that's going to work this time, says Randy. Yeah, that's kind of the point, but that may be the only route you can take.
The Mark Thompson Show.
This guy is everywhere. So excited. He's just come back from doing Good Day New York, which is the #1 morning show in New York. You can hear him on London radio. He's on KCBS radio in San Francisco. He's really everywhere, and we're so blessed, if I can use that word. Lucky might be a better word, to have David join us on Thursdays. He's the great former federal prosecutor, now working the defense side of the table. David Katz, everybody.
Great to be with you.
Hello, sir. Yeah, great to have you here. And if I do this, Tony, doesn't that help with our overall, I don't know. David, tell me first about what's happened in New York. You've just come from New York. I mentioned this because it's sort of wild. Didn't the feds seize the mayor of New York's phone and communication devices? What's happening back there?
Well, instead of agreeing, Mark, with his, counsel to meet at his office, or if they wanted to surprise him, to at least surprise him in some place that wasn't public and the media wouldn't have any access to it, because they do like the element of surprise when there's a, federally authorized search, as there was in this case. But instead of that, they seized his phones in a place where the media would know about it and be aware of it. And so what actually happened in the incident was that Mayor Adams of New York City is going to an event. I guess the FBI pulls over, they show their identification, they tell the security detail, get away from the mayor, and they seize his mobile devices. They imaged them and gave them back a day or two later. But of course, the media was very aware of that. And they're kind of treating him like, like a thug or like, anybody else, which you could say no one should be above the law. But I mean, he is the mayor. He's presumed innocent. And to so publicly humiliate him in that way by executing that search has all of New York buzzing. And the line that I have, and if anyone quotes me, that's fine, but please use my name, New York City, the city where the criminal investigation of the mayor never sleeps. And the reason I use that expression, that it never sleeps, is, of course, the former mayor of New York, America's mayor, as he was dubbed after 9/11, Rudy Giuliani, is in a world of trouble. He's under indictment in state court in Georgia, of course, as one of the more than a dozen defendants down there, along with Trump, Sidney Powell, Chesbro, Jenna Ellis. But obviously, he's under suspicion in many other cases. He's an unindicted co-conspirator, as best I recall, in the Washington, D.C. Federal case brought by Jack Smith, the special prosecutor. And of course, there have been very many other famous mayors of New York City. They're colorful. The airport, if you fly into New York, LaGuardia, is named for Fiorello LaGuardia, a longtime mayor of New York City who was both Italian and Jewish. Italian on his father's side, the name LaGuardia, Jewish on his mother's side. Of course, Bloomberg, who, if worse came to worse, remember, was going to run for president. And then, Biden did better and Bloomberg pulled out. And of course, Mayor Lindsay, for anybody who really goes back, talk about a Republican that doesn't exist anymore. Here was a liberal Republican mayor of New York City who started Earth Day in New York. Not too many of the current Republicans want to start Earth Day, more so than the Democrats.
What a great piece of, a great piece of New York mayoral history. It's no wonder they flew you in to Good Day New York to hear your thoughts on this. I mean, it's a great perspective on how things have changed. I wanted to now pivot to, and so nothing's been charged, just to be clear. There have been no charges leveled against the mayor. It's all just this high profile, it looks like a smear and an investigation, right? I say smear because of the high profile nature of the seizing of the phones.
When he was borough president, he promoted a 23-year-old woman to be basically in charge of campaign financing. She seems to have done a great job. He was elected mayor. Just a little more New York history, if your listeners and viewers don't mind. It was a really tough race. It was after de Blasio. There were a couple of, there was a commentator for MSNBC who ran. She seemed to have a very good chance. There was a more established politician. They were sort of all a little bit, on the left, not really associated with pro-police. And this mayor, Adams, is a former police captain. He's not an attorney. He's not like a longtime activist on any cause. But, he got in there, right? The others split the vote. He got the Democratic nomination. So he's an interesting, figure in that respect. He got a lot of money to help him in that race. That now 25-year-old fundraiser raised about $18 million. Her house was searched where she lives out in Brooklyn about a week ago. That also got a huge amount of publicity. The mayor then was in Washington, D.C. to meet with Biden administration officials about the migrant crisis in New York City. He immediately canceled his plans. He ran back to New York. He said it was because he didn't want to see, a 25-year-old associate of his traumatized. But he also pointed out that he'd made no contact with her because he didn't want it to look like it was an obstruction of justice or an attempt to shape her testimony to, comport with what he was going to say. And so that is the reason why people think they might have tried to get the mobile device of his to see, okay, you claim you had no contact with her, Mark. Well, maybe you did have a few contacts with her. Let's look on your phone. Let's see what, went back and forth. Did you guys send, anything back and forth that would shed light on this? Because they did do a federally approved search warrant of her house and they seized some stuff there. He has hired very good lawyers. He's hired attorneys who are former assistant U.S. attorneys in New York. And he's being pursued by the FBI and that office that he has attorneys from. And I just want to mention one last thing because it's so high profile there. One of the things is that there's a fire report, or they have to get fire clearance. And so it may seem like a little detail, but it's interesting. He's very close to Turkey, the country of Turkey, and he received a lot of money from Turkey. The allegation is that these were straw donors, Mark. In other words, Turkey or some Turkish company didn't want to disclose or wasn't allowed to make those campaign contributions. So instead of making one big campaign contribution to him and declaring it, they had a bunch of people who either worked for the Turkish company or had some involvement with them make 50 small donations. And the other result of making 50 small donations, you know, these campaign finance laws that are so hard to understand, one of the ways that they try to help small donors participate in politics is to give matching funds. And so you get an 8-to-1 matching fund. If you give $500 in New York, then the state of New York or the city of New York contributes, what did I just say, $500, well, let's say it's $100. They contribute $800. So they magnify your contribution. They have matching funds. Well, if you carve this up into 50 $500 donors, okay, you also get much more matching funds than you're entitled to had the one person just made the big contribution. But of course, some people roll their eyes and say straw donors. And the thing that he supposedly did wrong, that they know so far, because all of this got leaked to the New York Times. You know, this is what is so maddening. This is like Hillary Clinton all over again. How does the FBI and this well-respected Southern District of New York have all these cases that leak? When I was an assistant U.S. attorney in the Central District of California, God is my witness, these investigations, these search warrants did not leak. Well, these leaked to the New York Times, and it said this, that the Turkish consulate couldn't open its consul office near the United Nations in New York City, and they really wanted to, and they needed to because they had events. And so they called up the then borough president of Brooklyn, who was now the mayor Adams, and they said to him, can you call around and see what's going on with the fire commissioner, why they haven't issued a fire permit? And it turned out that the consul was entitled to a fire permit. There was nothing wrong with what was being done. So then people had to step back and say, you know, the way Trump always makes it look like it's a BS thing, and we know it's not BS because we get to the bottom of it. But when you get to the bottom of at least this allegation, Mark, against the mayor, it looks like it was normal politics. This is what a borough president's supposed to do for a borough constituent. Make a call and say, hey, wait a second, fire commissioner, shouldn't you be issuing this permit? They looked into it, and yes, they were just dragging their feet. So there it is. I hope I haven't bored your listeners with New York inside stuff.
No, it's interesting too, and I thought the last part particularly interesting in that, you know, sometimes it may appear or can be spun as something illegal or unethical, but the reality is that's just the way it's done. You know, I'm interested in the leak thing though, as it pertains to another case, and that's a Trump case, the Jenna Ellis deposition that was leaked. It was damaging in the extreme. I mean, certainly in terms of what it said about the plans for Trump never to leave office, that was the articulated plan that Jenna Ellis, who used to be an attorney in the Trump universe, it's what she proffered, I guess, to use the legal term, and it was in her deposition that she offered. And I'm wondering if you could speak to two things, just review for us that deposition is supposed to be secret, I guess. It's not supposed to be out there the way it has been for the last week or so. It was leaked, and now the leaker has admitted to the leak, and we can get into that leaker who was as well. And I'm wondering what happens to that leaker, who is an attorney.
Well, here's sort of the story on this thing, and we've discussed a lot this investigation down there, this criminal investigation in Georgia. And I pointed out before, but for the people who say that the DA's performance down there, Fani Willis and her office, that their performance hasn't been perfect and there are some things to criticize. Let me be the first to point out that Wisconsin, you know, DAs didn't move on this case. No DA in many of the other cities where they could have brought a case has moved on it, and she moved on it. She worked hard. She put a big staff on it. She organized it. She made it a priority. But every now and then she does stuff that, you know, we former federal prosecutors, a lot of people think that, you know, we're sort of arrogant. We think we know all the answers. You know, we all graduated at the top of our class and had these federal judicial clerkships and stuff like that. And so there's always been this kind of tension. And it's the same with the FBI and the local police. Like they come on the scene and, you know, the FBI acts like it knows everything, and the locals, you know, and then usually the plot will be that the locals end up, you know, getting their own back, right? Actually doing a really good job. And then the former assistant U.S. attorney or the FBI agent or whatever it is can be depicted. But here's the problem with this case. She didn't make sure she had a protective order. she didn't have a protective order. Now, in federal court, they don't fool around. You don't get the discovery until you sign the protective order, which says that you won't disclose the discovery to anyone outside of your office. And you sign and you agree, and then you're in contempt of court if you do that, right? This fellow, this attorney, was not, as I understand it, in contempt of court. They had bandied about having this protective order and what it should say and how far it should go, and let's not violate anybody's rights by not allowing them to use the discovery in some proper way. And then she stuck to her schedule of turning it over. She didn't go to the judge and say, Judge, I want special permission here. I'm not going to comply with the usual discovery disclosure dates because I want a protective order first. So while it was getting bandied about, this attorney leaked it to, I guess, ABC News. And then when there was a hearing, he admitted he leaked it to ABC News. So I don't think he either lied to the court, and I don't think he violated any order. His story is that he wants to have the case be transparent. And if I can add one more thing, well, you asked your question, Mark.
No. I think that you summarized it perfectly. I mean, it was interesting, though, her testimony or in deposition was that, essentially Trump wasn't planning to leave office. It was incendiary. So of all the things to leak, that was, inflammatory. That was a big headline, that, and clearly that was offered. That was one of the things that prosecutors saw valuable when she made her deal, Jenna Ellis, the former Trump attorney.
And the argument is that she knew she needed to make up something that incendiary, that inflammatory, so that she would get such a sweetheart deal. And so the argument's going to go that people understood, these are all attorneys, right? Jenna Ellis, Chesbrough, Sidney Powell. They knew they needed to make up something really valuable. So Trump's argument is going to be, and some other defendants that this evidence may be used against, they're going to say that shows that it was all made up. Look at how great it was for the prosecution. They got this vibe from the prosecution, even if they didn't get any instructions explicitly from any cop or from any DA, that they better come with something really good because that was going to get them the sweetheart deal. And so the argument is that shows just how likely it is that there was this kind of coercion, subtle coercion, to make stuff up on these three attorneys, and they made up this incendiary stuff. Putting that aside, it is a dynamite claim against Trump. I mean, standing alone, here's someone who testified under oath that Trump was not going to leave, and he made it clear, and his deputy counsel, I think in the White House at the time, made it clear, you don't understand, he's not leaving. Whatever courts do, whatever anybody does, he is not leaving office, which gave her the sort of confidence that, number one, he'd still be in office. I better do his bidding. I better make these crazy claims that I'm making to the legislature and to other officials down there in Georgia, because when this all shakes out, he's going to still be in power. And of course, the proper advice that should have been given to all of these people, and this was coming from almost everyone else, was that you lost in the courts. There's no fraud that tainted the election that would make any difference to who won. You need to start doing the transition and leaving. Let me add to what Sidney Powell said. Sidney Powell, they apparently asked her during her deposition, well, what do you think about the fact that you disagreed with all these other lawyers? And she said something along the lines of course, I knew, Trump knew, every other lawyer had told him, you have to leave, you lost, there are no legal defenses left anymore. And mine was the only voice he wanted to hear, because mine was the sole voice that told him there's some way to cling to power with some legal stuff. And that's why I did the legal stuff. So it's all devastating. What this lawyer disclosed is actually devastating to Trump. It's devastating to the people. And his argument that transparency is, I guess some people are going to try to argue that it was so great, it had to be made up. And that's certainly what Trump's going to say. He's going to say it's so great, it just shows it was made up because it's all, deep state conspiracy to get me. And now they have my own past lawyers on board because they're so scared of going to jail.
And what a remarkable revelation. You're absolutely right. I mean, that the guy had no intention, but it's consistent with, a feature that we saw in Trump, which was very likely that he wasn't going to leave office, without being pushed.
Can I say one thing, Mark? Can I say one more thing? And I'll make it really quick. The thing that people who think this was sort of technical, and I remember it and it was awful, but, maybe I'm going to vote for Trump because I think too many people are crossing the border, or I think that I'm paying too much for eggs, or or, gasoline. The people who are thinking like that, he did not intend to leave at all. And if he had managed to coerce Pence to delay the count or to do anything else, and he tried with all of his might and with all of his intimidation as well as cajolery on Pence, and Pence is a hero. Whatever happens to Pence the rest of his life, and no matter how much I disagree with him on a lot of political issues, he's a hero in American history. He's a profile of courage. Had he delayed it, okay, what would we have had? Dueling inaugurations? We would have had the army called out. He'd put people in the Department of Defense and into high posts. We would have had something verging on much more than the insurrection that we had. We would have had something akin to some sort of civil war. It would have been awful. Could have gone either way. And this man could have become a despot. People need to realize how close we came, how much courage Pence and a few others had in some of those states who were Republicans and who stood up. And so I hope people keep that in mind, that this election next year is about our democracy. It's so important to remember that. Inflation, the border, this is about our democracy. This is over 200 years of American history of what we're all about at stake here. And if you don't like Biden that much, I think you just said that it's not Biden against the almighty. It's Biden against the alternative. Biden against the alternative. Remember what the alternative was. Remember the pandemic screw-ups and everything that Trump was responsible for, all the authoritarianism, and this January 6th thing was just the awful icing on the awful cake.
Well, it's interesting that we know now that there are plans already in place, and one of the guys who is responsible for these plans is his old body man, they called him, the guy who followed Trump around. He's a 20-something dude at the time that he was picked up at the White House, and he was put in charge of White House personnel. Imagine, this is a huge job, and this guy gets it. And he was there solely to, first of all, he hired a bunch of his friends, these other, people who were 20-something, also in their early 20s. The White House was populated by a lot of these people just because he could hire them. He could hire and fire whoever he wanted. And then he pursued something of a litmus test for loyalty on Trump. And that's what he's doing now. They want to populate the rest of government with those who are loyalists to Trump. They don't want any wiggle room anymore. They don't want any of the John Kellys or the others around Trump who might blink. They want an unblinking fealty to Donald Trump, and they're already putting a lot of these, circling these wagons to make it happen. I want to just double back to the Georgia case for a second, just to be clear. So now, is there a protective order on this stuff? There was a leak, you're saying, because there was not a protective order. Now there is a protective order?
Well, once people saw these depositions on ABC News and all over the media, of course, the prosecutor down there, Fani Willis, she asked for an emergency hearing. And at the emergency hearing, that's when this attorney said, yes, I did it. I thought it was in the interest of transparency. Then the court did put a protective order, not like a gag order overall, but this discovery thing, you're entitled to the discovery because you have a criminal client to defend. And the idea that because of that, you get to disseminate it to the world, or you think it's the case of the century, so the public ought to know, have another lawyer represent the person. But this is very, very normal that there's a protective order and you can use it to defend your client. You can't use it to disseminate it to the world. And so the protective order will stop the dissemination to the world. There's some argument that it should sort of all be out there in a normal case. So I'm normally the one thinking, wow, this is a pretty restrictive protective order. But this case is different. There is this intimidation of witnesses that goes on. It's like Trump wants to have his federal trial in D.C. He says, open to the cameras. And actually, the media always loves it to be open to the cameras. Of course, all the TV stations would love it to be, televised, and it would be a huge event. It would be good for ratings. Let's step back, okay, and think about what the real effect would be. Trump would use it to make a complete circus out of it. He would intimidate witnesses. If you said something against Trump, that people would not only hear about it or, get it on, Trump's social media, but it would be like OJ, right? It would be OJ, except with Trump, okay? And people have been intimidated. There are people out there who are willing to commit violence in his name, and he certainly does incite them. Do we have 2 minutes to talk about Santos, the fall of George Santos?
Yeah, this is just right. But before we get to Santos, I just want to mention one thing, that tomorrow we'll have the judge. They had closing arguments in that case in Colorado, and so a judge will rule on the case of President Trump being taken off the ballot because of the U.S. Constitution essentially forbidding anyone who's engaged in insurrection from being on the ballot, from holding office. Again, those closing arguments, so I think the judge will rule tomorrow. Now to Santos, that's breaking news as we're speaking. Go ahead.
Well, by the way, the point you just made, 2 states' courts have now ruled that this is a political question. We always talked about how this issue of a violation of the 14th Amendment would be decided, and it wasn't like you're under 25 and you want to, run for president. This obviously is more complicated. And the idea of some Secretary of State in this state or that state deciding it has always been kind of a question for lawyers, even if it's obvious from what we saw on television on January 6th that Trump didn't tamp it down, that he gave the speech, that he did all the things that led up to January 6th. But how is it going to be determined? It looks like 2 states have basically said it's not going to be determined by the courts of this state. Maybe it goes to Congress. In other words, maybe what has to happen is that Congress is the one who decides under the 14th Amendment whether a candidate, and of course what that means is as long as the Republicans stick with Trump, right? But it's not absurd what these courts have said. It's not absurd, the idea that Congress would decide whether a candidate for president had met the qualifications or not, and that would be where the determination of the violation or the incapacity of a candidate to run for president or be president would be. It would be with Congress. Okay, Santos.
Santos, yeah, quickly, go ahead.
George Santos, he's the Congress member from Republican from a suburban Long Island, right outside New York City district, who has committed every ethical financial violation that we've heard about for all this time. And it seems like, how come this man cannot be expelled from the Congress already? Well, they finally issued a unanimous bipartisan 50-some page report detailing all of the things that he did. Among them, he spent campaign funds that are earmarked for a campaign on himself, on Botox, on staying in fancy hotels, on buying Hermès scarves, you name it, he did it. And it looks like there's going to be another vote. And I believe that one will finally expel him from Congress. It's not a good idea to expel people from Congress. Remember, you can expel someone because you don't like the fact that they're very left-wing or they're very right-wing, or what we're talking about now, let's say because they're very, in the opinion of people, in favor of the Palestinian cause. And I don't think that's good. I think expelling people in general is bad. But this is what they have an ethics committee for, Mark. The ethics committee has met. It took a long, long time to get there, but they've met, they've decided, and I think now there's going to be a real groundswell to expel him from Congress. He said already he won't run for re-election. I don't think that he had a snowball's chance in hell of being re-elected.
Yeah, he's pretty much knocked over all the pins in running afoul of any sort of ethics, as you say. He just seems so openly corrupt. But it's funny, the last thing as we button it out with the great David Katz, it seems to me, David, I've never been for taking people off the ballot even. I've said on this show, even though, I just think Trump represents a real existential threat. I know that phrase is used a lot in a different context, but to democracy in this country. And still, I don't think he should be removed from the ballot. I think once you start removing people from the ballot, you begin to see how that can be used as a method politically to remove political opponents. So I'm not a big fan of that, or even removing people from Congress for things they've said. But yeah, Santos just seems to be, as you say, it's a bridge too far. Hey, we love talking to you. You're so great, David, and we'll try to follow your media appearances between now and next week. Kim, are we on the air next week? Thursday? I don't think we are. Thanksgiving, right? So we don't have a show on Thanksgiving.
I don't know. Have we made that decision? Are we going dark?
We're going dark for Thanksgiving,
right.
but we
that's it. Decision made.
Maybe you can book me for Monday or Tuesday.
We will. Let's Kim, can you help?
Yes, I can.
Yeah, we'll get David for another day next week since we'll miss him for Thanksgiving. Okay. We enjoy you so much. The great David Katz, everybody. Thanks, David.
Great to be with you.
Yeah, love it.
The Mark Thompson Show.
Wow, we've had a lot going on today, haven't we?
Busy little Mark Thompson show this is.
This is we're packed full, and maybe my favorite. I was almost going to talk to David Katz about this case, but I decided to keep it aside. This lawsuit in New York. It is my favorite story in the entire show. and it comes up for Belinda's segment, which we're going to get into right now, I think.
Yeah.
Do I have time to get right to Belinda, Kim? Do you mind if we...
But I don't want to do a full newscast, but I do
Let's
want
do
to
a
tell
news
you...
capsule.
Well, let me just tell you this breaking story that there is a guilty verdict in the case of the man who attacked the husband of Nancy Pelosi. They have found David DePape guilty, and he has admitted attacking Paul Pelosi. He apologized when he took the stand this week, but the verdict came in this morning. We now know that there is a guilty verdict for Paul DePape in this case. So sentencing will happen. He is could face 30 years in prison for this attack. So that is still to come.
He's a dangerous guy. You know, the Pelosi's were just one stop on what was a planned horror.
Yeah.
He bought all that crap, you know, all that MAGA crap, and he was ready to go out and act on it, and did act on it in the case of Pelosi. Yeah. So, that's break. So, guilty.
That's it. Yeah.
All right.
Guilty, guilty, guilty. And now we can move on to It's the Planet.
No, we will indeed.
Hey, which one do you use, Mark Thompson?
Use Mark Thompson.
The Mark Thompson Show.
The planet Earth.
Some call me nature.
I am very passionate about the planet
Earth.
A living, breathing planet capable of sustaining whatever life forms we see fit to deposit on it.
Spock, judging by the pollution content of the atmosphere, I believe we have arrived.
It's the planet stupid. No. It's the planet stupid.
Our guide for It's the Planet Stupid, Belinda Weymouth. Hi, Belinda Weymouth. How are you?
I'm fantastic, Mark. Thank you. How are you?
I'm well, and you are today, including in your batch of stories that usually bring us about various things happening. As I was saying before, it's really my favorite story, meaning it speaks to something that you've touched on, which is corporate ownership of the pollution that is the result of a lot of these corporate businesses. There's so much polluting going on that's then unaccounted for. They take all the profits, but they don't pay for any of the cleanup. This is happening in New York.
Yes, yeah, it's fantastic. So yesterday, yes, the New York Attorney General, Letitia James, people will know her name, and you will have discussed her cases against Trump a lot with your previous guest, David Katz. They're suing Pepsi. And it's really fantastic. They're not the first state. You know, Minnesota and Connecticut have also gone up against the plastic, industry, which, as we know, is a branch of fossil fuels and petrochemicals. That's where the feedstock for plastics come from. But, this lawsuit is really great. And the thing that's really, that I sort of love about, how they're able to do this is, unlike all the greenhouse gas emissions, we can't see them going up into the atmosphere. There's not, they don't have little branding on them, that the CO2 molecule comes from ExxonMobil and this one comes from Shell. But with Pepsi's pollution, their name is all over that stuff because, what they've been actually able to say is that Pepsi is responsible for 17% of the trash that can be attributed to a specific brand because of course it's all packaging. And they have so many brands, and what the area that they're looking in is, the Buffalo River in upstate New York. And they're like, this stuff is everywhere. You're endangering Buffalo's water supply, the environment, and public health. And that is absolutely true. And, I just have to, go through the list of their brands because I think this is so, kind of wild. So Pepsi, obviously Pepsi, their drink. Doritos, Cheetos, Fritos, Gatorade, Mountain Dew, Ruffles, Tostitos, Lay's chips, Quaker, Lipton, Cracker Jack. I mean, the list is endless. So when they come in at almost 20% of the rubbish that they're finding, in the Buffalo River, you can see why, because they're responsible for a lot of the packaging that's out there. And they make all these claims like, our packaging is completely recyclable and we're doing this and we're being more responsible. And what the evidence on the ground is showing is, no, you're not. No, you're not. You say it, but it's just not true.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned all those products. Tony just had them up there a second ago because, it's, Pepsi's like the hood ornament, but the rest of the car is chock full of pollutants. I wonder what the what the realities are concerning, handicapping the real legal ownership that Pepsi may have at the end of this case. In other words, whether you can win this case against them. They have the most expensive lawyers in the world.
Well, I think Letitia James means business. And I think that, we are absolutely sick of all the plastic pollution that we're living with. We get these terrible stories every week. We're ingesting a credit card worth of plastic, every human being, approximately per week. We're drinking it. We're eating it in our food, tiny, tiny microfibers that we're not seeing, and we're breathing it in. It's in the air. And so it's so ubiquitous. It's so pervasive. It's all over our beaches. And then the fact that it's in our drinking water. I mean, this is crazy. It's in our salt. It's in our honey. It's in our, IPAs. I mean, it's just everywhere. And I loved that they really talked about the health concerns. They really talked about, plastic pollution has been linked to early puberty, lower sperm count, altered reproductive organ functioning. This is happening they're finding in research with other mammals. If it's happening to other mammals, of course, it's happening to us.
Yeah, I mean, that just states it starkly, and you've talked about it here so many times. I want to move on to something else that you brought to our attention, and that is the climate refugees who have been leaving areas already affected by the climate crisis and rising waters. They've been leaving now for some time.
Yeah. This is huge. And what happened last week at the Pacific Island Forum? So Pacific leaders met, and the Prime Minister of Australia, Anthony Albanese, said yes to the Tuvaluan Prime Minister, Calcianatano. He said, "We need your help. Please help us. We're a nation of low-lying atolls." So atolls are, they're basically coral islands. It's a coral reef. They're usually around a lagoon, and they are so, the amount of vulnerability that they suffer, because of climate change, and it's just from rising sea levels, and they contribute nothing to global greenhouse gases. So then to say to a rich country like Australia, which has a ton of coal and is responsible, per capita, Australia has, the highest, they say, lots of statistics I read, the highest per capita rate of carbon emissions. And they asked Australia, they said, "Will you help us? Will you take us? Will you take our people?" And Australia said yes. And, this is what needs to happen. Western countries need to help their poor neighbors who have done nothing to create climate change. They're actually calling this deal the Falapili Union, and in Tuvaluan that means the traditional values of good neighbors, where you have care and mutual respect. And what Australia has committed to doing so far is that they will take 280 people per year. They will give them social services. They will get education. They will be taken care of. Now, that's quite a small number when you consider there are 11,000 people who live in Tuvalu. And it's estimated that by 2050, a lot of their vital infrastructure and their land will be below the high tide level. So that means there are the two prime ministers there. So, it makes me quite emotional, because this is a thing that we've been talking about so long in the environmental movement. There has to be environmental justice for these countries, especially island nations, where they've done nothing to contribute to climate change, and they are absolutely bearing the brunt of it. I mean, they don't have decent drinking water because there's so much saltwater intrusion into their own aquifers. Now, at the rate they're going to take the Tuvaluans, it's going to take 40 years, but it's a start, and it's a huge step in the right direction. And when looking at that deal, it made me think about the Carteret Islands. Now, the Carteret Islands are part of Papua New Guinea. Same thing, very low-lying atoll. Just to give people an idea of how low-lying they are, they're 1.2 meters above sea level on the Carteret Islands. There are 7 atolls. That's 47 inches above sea level. 47 inches. That is nothing. When you think about a storm surge and what that means, and we've been talking about the Carteret Islands since 2005. They were basically the first climate refugees that the world went, oh my goodness, here is this group of people who live this idyllic Pacific island, a very subsistence kind of level existence. But half their land has disappeared since 1994. The people suffer from malnutrition. They can't grow enough of their crops. They have droughts. They have the saltwater intrusion. And the really sad thing there, unlike what's going to happen for Tuvalu, because they've got this big neighbor who has said, yes, we'll take you. The Carteret Islands are part of Papua New Guinea. They are, their most direct government comes from the Bougainville Island, which is 83 kilometers away. They're talking about them being relocated there. The estimates for how much it would cost to move, there are roughly 1,500 people on the Carteret Islands. It would cost $5.3 million to move them. But because of local government corruption, incredible indifference, because these islands don't have any socio-economic sort of value to the powers that be, the powers above them. And then also the other thing that's tough is that there's limited land on islands. So the amount of land that you'd need for these 1,100 people from the Carteret Islands to be able to grow their crops and live, even at a subsistence level, Papua New Guinea, you can't buy and sell land. And so, yeah, there's look at it. I mean, you can see how vulnerable they are.
Sure.
And they have this really simple way of life. They have moved already 10 families to Bougainville. But because they come from this super isolated place and they live this very simple life, they actually find it really, really hard to leave. And they have incredible connection to their islands because their ancestors are there. They don't want to leave them.
Well, they're like many native peoples. They're more connected to the land than many in the developed world are.
Yeah. But when you think the price tag for moving these people is $5.3 million, I mean.
Well, but what were you saying? That it's the corruption, and you were saying, what are the impediments to it? The corruption and the fact that they don't want to leave, or those are two elements?
So the government that has direct sort of control over them it's called Bougainville, and it's an island that's 83 kilometers from Carteret Islands. It's part of Papua New Guinea, and Papua New Guinea is in the centralized government. But they don't want to get involved in, they sort of say for the, Papua New Guinea, it's sort of this provincial little problem, like, why should we bother? This is the Carteret Islands, and they're even having a problem with, big greedy nations coming in and fishing all the fish around their atoll, because atolls are breeding ground for fish. So they even have to go further afield now, to get their fish. So there's an indifference towards them because this group of islands has no socio-economic value to either, Papua New Guinea as the central government or Bougainville as their more immediate government. And then there's also the scarcity of land because if they're all living on islands. So, and the way the legal real estate laws are in Papua New Guinea, you can't buy and sell land. And so what they're estimating they need. So far, the Catholic Church has given an NGO that's taking care of trying to, move the Carteret people. They got 81 hectares. Well, they estimate that for that many people, they need 1,400 hectares of land to be able to farm and support themselves and, live properly. And, land is a commodity that's in super short supply if you live on a small Pacific island.
Jeez. That really states it starkly.
Yeah.
I don't know, how do you get there from here type thing?
Yeah. And the truth is we need things like what just happened with Australia and Tuvalu. We need a big neighbor that's got land like Australia and resources to come in and say, we'll be the big brother, the big sister, we'll help you, we'll be the ones, because otherwise what we're facing when we look into the future, people already don't like the refugee, the immigration.
Sure, people, right. It's everybody likes the velvet rope up. They don't want to drop the velvet rope for anybody, for any refugee or immigrant. But you're right. We need countries to step up and to recognize this as a global crisis and to welcome these people in, but with sufficient, as you've suggested, sufficient acreage, hectares, to make it workable. There was a film, I saw it at Sundance, actually. I think I saw one before. It was called There Once Was an Island. That's what it's called. There Once Was an Island. You can find it streaming, I think, and elsewhere. And it is this story that Belinda's telling. There Once Was an Island, it's called. And it's a great watch. I mean, you can see, literally, you see the water. You see, even before there's any storm surge or anything, how the water is encroaching on their life and how they're trying to continue with their life while also understanding that this encroachment is going to make it harder and harder for them to live. I thought it was excellent. There Once Was an Island, it's called. Look at that, Tony, hustling that up. Thank you very much. Belinda, we're almost out of time, or maybe we really are out of time. I wanted to get to the volcanic stuff. Can you just quickly give me 1 minute on the volcanic? Because there's a period of seismic activity and volcanic activity that's pretty concerning.
You mean the one off the coast of Japan and the fact that it actually made an island, that we've got all these other islands?
Exactly.
Yeah, and the island that it made was 66 feet above sea level. I mean, Japan is right on the ring of fire. So, there's going to be, volcanic eruptions, and then you get all the debris. And it happened in a shallow enough part of the ocean that as that debris all accumulated, it created this. And by the way, it's only a temporary island because it's already washing away. But, we sort of need more of that,
So I shouldn't be so concerned with the seismic activity. It's just it's part of the game there, as you say, in that seismically active area. Am I wrong to refer to this in that same way with seismic activity? Maybe I am. I thought that volcanic eruptions are just that. They're an offshoot of seismic activity.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Yeah. This is seismic activity. And look at the island chain of Hawaii. I mean, those are volcanoes, and there's enough eruption and then the disposition of the debris from it, and you get these lava, basically, islands. And so, yes, and this is the Earth. This is the living Earth. This is the magma coming out of the center of the Earth and, exploding to the surface. So
I love it when you talk magma. Belinda, you can find her here on Thursdays. I'm so encouraged by this Pepsi thing. I hope that it's the beginning of a template that is followed by other states. And we look now. Next week we are dark on Thanksgiving. No show, so you have a week off, Belinda.
Okay, all right.
We'll catch you. We'll catch you after that. Thanks, Belinda.
Happy Thanksgiving to everybody.
Happy Thanksgiving to you. That's It's the Planet Stupid for today. Now you'd run the.
More.
It's the Planet Stupid. No. It's the Planet Stupid.
Next time, only on The Mark Thompson Show.
Yeah, I feel we've done a lot today,
The Mark Thompson Show.
We've done a lot today, and then we didn't do a lot today because we're overbooked.
Yeah.
The show is overbooked, and I blame Kim. I'm sorry.
I'll take responsibility.
Kim, how are you?
I am... Tony, good job on hustling everything today.
Yeah. That was great video of that baby island in Japan.
Yeah. Cool. And Kim, good stuff, actually, with the breaking news that Kim had on the guilty verdict.
Kim, how are you?
That was good.
So many super sticker folks to thank that we.
Oh, really? Let me put my temporary credibility glasses on so I can read them.
You've just had so many guests that it didn't seem right to put them up during that moment because they wouldn't be,
Yeah, you
celebrated
felt
as they need to
discretion
be.
was the right. Yeah. Okay, so this is one of the ways you support us. And go ahead, I'll follow your lead. Harry Magnan with a $5 for your Kim Akazi at the Red Jack.
That's
yeah.
right.
Big shout out. The Kim Akazi at the Red Jack Saloon in San Francisco. Kathleen Bryant with $20 super sticker. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
That is so generous, Kathleen Bryant. You know, in fact, Kathleen Bryant, I'd like to say something to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Yes. Cabo Jeff, what up, Cabo Jeff, with a big shout out. And a 10 spot. Thank you, Cabo Jeff. Super sticker. I love it. Pinky, $1 a day. With a big shout out to the Pink. Wow. What a great crew we have.
Yeah.
You know, this show is kept on the air by just a handful of people compared to the number of people who watch it. But it's really, I'm not going to cry.
I'm not going to cry. I'm not going to cry.
But I'm just saying I am moved emotionally by the
I'm not going to cry. I'm not going to cry.
by the support. So Jim Slayton says, I just ordered French roast. Should arrive today or tomorrow. I should have ordered the holiday blend. I spaced out. Yeah, from Coachella Valley Coffee. I'm telling you, I love this stuff. Here's the holiday blend right behind me. It is great. I ordered my holiday coffees yesterday, said Heidi. Thank you for supporting. And you won't be disappointed. I mean, I'm not going to turn you on to coffee. I would never say it's the best coffee I've tasted if it really weren't, you know. It's just terrific. And they are great people at Coachella Valley. And we will get them on for the holidays, too, with a conversation. And don't forget to use the discount code because the coffee costs. So I want you to get a discount. CoachellaValleyCoffee.com. And when you check out, there's the holiday blend. Oh, I love it. It's dreamy. The holiday blend. Oh, the holiday blend. Oh, I love it. CoachellaValleyCoffee.com. And when you check out, use the code MARKT. You'll get 10% off. I mean, is there anything better than 10% off? When you go someplace you know that you're getting a discount. And you're supporting our show by supporting our sponsors, so that's great. Well,
it's that time again.
I hate to do it, Kim. I mean, I really was into it. I felt I was just actually picking up speed.
I'm not going to cry. I'm not going to cry.
I'm not going to cry, but they are taking away my favorite toy, which is this magnificent crew. And Tony, thank you for finally showing up to work.
Thanks, Tony.
And Kim, thank you. We're going to get your mic a little bit pumped up for the future.
Kim, how are you?
Yeah. And then Kim is available now. I mean, when I say now, within about 2.5 minutes, she'll be over at the After Party Live.
We'll do it live. I'll write it and we'll do it live.
With John Daly. So good times, everybody, as we slide into it.
I'm Shadow Stevens for the Mark Thompson Show. Bye-bye.
Tomorrow brings Jim Avila here.
Bye-bye.
And our Friday crew. Until then, bye-bye.